Hey, what's up everyone? Alex here. So, JRPGs that make us feel young. That is quite the topic. And I say that because there are some games that make us feel old as well. But the difference between those games and the JRPGs that we're about to talk about in this video is that those games that make us feel old were actually at the apex of this mountain of nostalgia. And these games that we're going to be talking about today are over that apex. In other words, it's these games that really push the boundaries of what nostalgia is and just brings us sheer joy despite some of the serious subject matter that they bring up. Now, of course, I say all of this with the caveat that there are many other JRPGs that make us feel young as well. So do me a favor, after watching this video, please let me know if there are any JRPGs that make you feel young. JRPGs that capture the spirit of youth, that sense of adventure that we all long for. Because even though we're talking about 10 games here, 10 games is not enough to pretty much talk about the entire scope and breadth of the entire JRPG genre. So I'm curious to hear what you have to say. But for now, let's find out what these 10 games are, shall we? I've no doubt that just saying the words Chrono Trigger immediately sends a signal to your brain. To me, whenever I hear these words, I remember my time with Marl at the Millennium Fair, the fireworks that opened up the game, as well as Chrono's mom, who wakes us up to get ready for the fair. But that's not the only thing that makes Chrono Trigger feel youthful. The vibrant sprite work, whose characters and enemies were created by the late great Akira Toriyama, that managed to differentiate itself from Dragon Quest. The insanely ambitious time-traveling storyline that sent our imaginations soaring with new possibilities. The fantastic soundtrack that matched every time period that we visited, as well as the incredible combo-based attacks that you can do during combat, all came together to deliver a powerhouse of a JRPG that stands the test of time. No pun intended. It's why every time I play Chrono Trigger, it's always able to take me back to the SNES days, when some of my all-time favorite JRPGs were released. And anyone who played the game back in the day, like I did, will find that revisiting Chrono's adventure is like jumping into a time machine, taking us back to what is effectively a celebration of our youthful exuberance. My wife is the biggest fan of the Shining Force series, so when she sat me down a few years ago and played through the very first Shining Force together, its vibrant graphics, sometimes laughable translation, and catchy soundtrack brought me back to the good old days of playing my Sega Genesis. I love the little cutscenes that play whenever units attack each other, the way that every single map in this game can have battles happen, as well as how easily digestible its story is. There's no complicated swerves or anything of that nature in Shining Force, just those classic tropes played up by people who just want to make great games. In fact, you can sense in every facet of Shining Force that its makers loved what they made, infusing it with so much of their childhood fantasies and just bravely making something that has influenced so many other tactical JRPGs for years to come. Not many people talk about Shining Force, but I think they should. And if you do choose to play the game now, some decades after its release, know that you're in for not just a fantastic adventure, but also one that'll bring you back to some fun, younger times. When I was a kid, the idea of embarking on an epic quest was always exciting. I think that's one of the big reasons why I grew up loving JRPGs so much. They allowed me to go on these globe-trotting journeys, venturing beyond the comforts of my home as a youngster. This is why I feel Grandia deserves a spot on this list, because it's one of the best games I've played that captured that same sense of childlike wonder of going on a grand adventure. One aspect in particular that has always resonated with me was the budding romance between Justin and Fina. It starts off with Justin looking up to Fina as a seasoned adventurer, someone that has already gone on multiple journeys and has seen the world. This admiration slowly develops into mutual affection, and it ends up being so wholesome to see unfold. Every single one of us had that one crush that we admired when we were young, and to see that same sort of romance blossom in Grandia will almost always take me back to those cherished memories. While many games on this list will remind you of the emotions you felt during childhood, Earthbound's quirkiness is a good reminder of just how strange the world felt when we were younger, as everything at that time felt fresh and new. It takes me back to all those confusing but exciting times as a child, when the world was still a huge mystery, even down to its most mundane elements. Earthbound's colorful yet strange take on American suburbia brings us back to those same wide-eyed perceptions of reality. This is conveyed effectively through what would typically be regular monsters in other JRPGs. Instead of wolves, goblins, and dragons, enemies can range from dogs, mice, crows, to skaters, robots, and aliens. Earthbound absolutely makes me feel young again whenever I play it, but not because of how wholesome and cozy it is. Rather, this feeling comes from the game being so offbeat and eccentric that it makes us feel like we're looking at the world with wide-eyed wonder all over again. I don't talk about Kingdom Hearts a lot on the channel, so you'd be surprised to know that I'm actually a huge fan of the original. I remember picking up the Japanese version back in the day, even though I had absolutely no idea how to read Japanese, and then finally picking it up in the US and realizing just how crazy its story is. Kingdom Hearts won me over with its gorgeous and colorful visuals, as well as an art style that managed to marry Tetsuya Nomura's design aesthetic with that of Disney's, in a difficult feat that people take for granted these days. But the real reason why I love Kingdom Hearts is the ability to re-experience the stories of every Disney world we visit in a new way. As someone who grew up loving Disney films, and still do, Kingdom Hearts never fails to bring me back to those moments when I watched the classics on the big screen as a child. And when you combine that with a fun action combat system that uses the tried and true Final Fantasy menu system, and what you have is an epic journey that'll make you laugh, cry, and cheer for your favorite characters. There's something truly special about the original Paper Mario for the Nintendo 64. And while its sequel is arguably the more superior game, there's just something so cozy and charming about the original. A lot of JRPGs tend to be preoccupied with either heavy subject matter, complex narratives, or deep lore. And while all of that can be great, Paper Mario stands out for being so simple, straightforward, and engaging. And it all starts with its story. Bowser, as you might expect, is at it again, and it's time to save Princess Peach while going on a journey through the Mushroom Kingdom. No need to get more complex than that. The adorable aesthetic, coupled with a jaunty soundtrack and playful combat mechanics, all contribute to this game's sense of whimsy. I think for a lot of people, their very first video game experience tends to be a Mario title. So even before playing Paper Mario, chances are there's already a sense of familiarity. And when you combine that with a unique take on the JRPG formula that only Nintendo can dream up, and you've got a fun adventure that anyone can truly enjoy. When I thought about if there was a specific Tales game that did the best job at capturing that sense of youthful whimsy and adventure, I knew that it had to be Tales of Symphonia. The diverse soundtrack, shonen anime art style, and unique fantasy setting coalesces in a beautiful and effective way. On top of its aesthetics achieving this feeling, I think that what really brings it home for me is the chemistry between its party members. Let's get this straight. Pretty much all of the Tales games have great casts of characters that are a blast to hang out with. But of all of its wonderful casts, I think Symphonia's vibes go a long way in making them feel like a group of friends. When I think about being younger, I remember always being in a group of friends, hanging out and getting into all kinds of mischief. I think Symphonia, more than any other game in the series, captures that feeling the most. Lloyd, Janice, and Colette are an especially wonderful trio that are always teasing and making fun of each other, but truly do care for one another despite the jokes. On top of being a wonderful entry, whether you grew up with it or not, Tales of Symphonia does a great job of making you feel like a kid again. Before Trials of Mana was ever a thing in the West, I'd always heard about how we missed out on the incredible Seiken Densetsu 3. Originally released at the tail end of the SNES days, we never got to see it because everyone at Squaresoft was busy getting ready to move on to the PlayStation. But many years later, and not only did we get a great port of the original version in the Collection of Mana, but we also got a full remake in the Trials of Mana remake. But what's so interesting about this remake is its intentional design that mirrors the originals ever so closely. Elements from the original release were carefully crafted and reincorporated into the remake, as well as several refinements that just made this version ultimately better despite the lack of multiplayer. What's more is that because of its reverence to the source material, its levels, despite being all rendered in 3D, made me feel like I was playing the original in the best ways possible. Not many people get this, but the ones that do often cite an intangible quality to this remake that's very unique to it, which brings us back to cherished moments of our youth when grand adventure didn't have to mean exploring massively huge worlds. Dragon Quest XI's is a double dose of goodness, and I'll tell you why. Not only can you play the game entirely in modern form, but you can also play it as a classic 2D Dragon Quest. Creating one game is tough enough, but saying that you've got two massive games for the price of one, and still delivering a consistent art design across both, and turning them into amazing games in their own right, is a feat that more people should talk about. The Dragon Quest series contrasts heavily from the more serious tones of Final Fantasy, in that it's generally a more wholesome adventure, despite some of the dark subject matter. And it does it all with a smile on its slimy face, creating a rogues gallery of enemies with punny names, as well as charming and delightful characters that we feel a close kinship with immediately. And as I mentioned, Dragon Quest XI's does this twice over, giving us the same story, characters, and gameplay in two very different presentations that appeal to both our modern sensibilities and the retro gamer in us. And to be honest, maybe it's really a trifecta, the two different presentations and its general wholesomeness that makes this one take us back to our younger years. I'm not just settling on a single Pokemon game. I'm gonna count the entire freaking series for this one. The reason is pretty simple too. Whether you're actively nostalgic for an older entry or playing a new one for the first time, they all achieve the same effect. I grew up playing Pokemon Blue and Yellow in particular, so of course those games have a special place in my heart. However, even playing one of the newer games, they somehow evoke similar emotions in me. I think this is because whether you've grown up with a series or not, Pokemon as a whole is designed to make you feel like a kid, regardless of your actual age. I think this is a big reason why the franchise has persisted for as long as it has, as its appeal accounts in equal measure for both kids and adults. I mean, really, the world of Pokemon is just so inviting that you can't help but get wrapped up in its vibes. Just thinking about capturing Pokemon, getting attached to them, and getting into fights with your rival, only to see them eat their smug remarks, makes me want to just jump back into that world and start a new playthrough all over again. Ultimately, that's what Pokemon means to me, the simple, unfiltered desire of doing something just because it's fun. And those, my dear friends, are JRPGs that bring us back to the good old days of our youth. I'd like to hear if you've got any suggestions as to what games you played that would fit on this list. Post your thoughts in the comments below and let's talk about it. Speaking of, I remember playing Dead Rising 18 years ago. Can you believe that? And I recently got a chance to play the deluxe remaster that's coming out next month. And if that's not your jam and you want to explore the wide genre of RPG experiences out there, I also made a top 10 video that has one game per type of RPG. You can find both of them right here, so go check them out. Thank you very much for watching, everyone, and I'll see you in the next video.